Hi, welcome back to Flipping Pages Stirring Sauces. We are going to be reading from Spiritual Messages Channeled Through Me, written by my sister Denise, and is being read by me. I would like to take this time out to thank all of the people who have subscribed, liked, and shared. This is a heartfelt thank you. And I wanted to record outside today. As I was driving home, I noticed something very unusual. Our sun that was supposed to be setting in the west was setting in the north. Now, I do not know if the creator did that especially for me, just for me, or if anyone else noticed that, but the creator did say, look up, and we need to be looking up because we are quickly becoming the head and not the tail. And that is all I have to say on that. In looking at the sun setting in the north and not in the west, I was reminded of the days when I used to go camping on the French River in North Bay, Ontario, or when I went camping in Algonquin Park, again in Northern Ontario. And we would bathe in the lake, cook on an open fire. When we were on the French River, we would catch pickerel, which is a type of fish, and we would wrap it in foil with sprinkled with black pepper and salt, and fresh lemon juice would be squeezed onto it. And yeah, it was all wrapped up with, like I said, with fiddlehead and wild white asparagus, and it was so delicious. This was before I became a vegetarian. Um, those were amazing times, and I just wanted to share that. I also wanted to acknowledge my godson who is about to be 7 years old. Um, he's the love of my life. He really is. I guess you could say he's a new love, and I really would like to spend some time with him. I'm missing him. Yeah. Um, well, I won't touch on that. But anyway, as I've said before, I am not a perfect human being. I will make mistakes. I will misread sentences, and I will mispronounce words. But I will do my best to correct them. And I'm just going to get right into it. And chapter 15 is titled Home Again. Home. As he and Ventis expected, is not as the family knew it less than a month ago. But this place with its great promise marks a new beginning for them, for all of them. 20 faces from our wagons. Look at the pile of ashes where a cabin once stood. The cabin is now the lone building, as far as the eyes can see. It is occupied by chickens freely wandering in and out of it. Baruzzi provides his clan with instructions for their lives. For 2 weeks, the sky has been our roof. The sky will continue to be our roof. But we will no longer be traveling under it. This is where we will build. our home. We have much preparation to get done before dark. As they did during their travels, 2 night watches are assigned. The first pitches tents and takes their rest for the next few hours. Baruzzi's next order of business is to use the barn as his headquarters until a more suitable structure is erected. Brave and his team are assigned this task and therefore are not a part of the night watch. Unlike Josiah, the runaway who is a part of the second night watch, Brave's team is tasked with repairing and cleaning the barn and constructing storage areas in it and making rudimentary furniture for it. Without being instructed by Baruzzi or Ventese, the women go about preparing food for the entire clan by gathering wood for fires, carrying water from the stream for cooking, slaughtering chickens, and peeling potatoes. Josiah assigns himself to helping the women with the least appealing tasks, slaughtering of the chickens and the picking of the feathers. I remember this from childhood and I didn't like it. It is an exciting, busy scene in which progress is producing. Living amenities can be seen almost immediately. Snacks and refreshments are being served while dinner is being prepared. Tents are being pitched, the barn is being renovated, the children are enjoying the outdoors, futilely trying to catch chickens from the numerous supplies still pecking about the yard. At nightfall, when most are asleep and everyone is settled into place, except the 3 men still working on the barn by torchlight, Baruzzi decides to move his buried treasure. The night watchmen are aware of his movement in the dark, offer their help. However, Baruzzi refuses by stating it's a one-man job. His treasures is as he had buried it. He could have left it there if the sheriff hadn't opened the envelope and read the map to it. He has a new spot for it, under muddy water, not far from the spot by the stream where he had decided to make Ventese his wife. With his treasure now buried for the second time, he counts the number of steps from where he had made his vow to Ventese to where he now secures his insurance policies, as he is now included in his safe, his will for his family, and all his assets. Brave and his team place the burlap bags of money into wooden trunks that they have attached to a wall in the barn. The slave-related documents that once belonged to Blightus Roden are now neatly stored on newly built shelves. There is a sleeping area for the family, complete with newly made wooden bed frames and mattresses, which were made by stitching blankets together and stuffing them with grass. Ventese has already settled the children into their corner of the house and is now doing what she can to make the place more homey. Like Ventese, Baruzzi is happy for his friends' kind consideration, but tells the men that they need not have gone to such an extent. The strongest looking slave, Brave, is the one to speak for all 3. In no time we will have you and the missus and the children in a proper house, massa. We start tomorrow early. All right, fellows, then call it a night. Yes, sir. Good night, sir, he responds. Each of the dedicated helpers nods to Ventese before walking out. It has been a particularly trying day for everyone on site, and tonight holds the promise of tomorrow being another day of laborious work. Thus, Baruz is ready to bed down for the night, but not before he ensures the guards are alertly on watch and their replacement are getting the rest they need in order to make a seamless switch at the appointed time. His check leaves him comfortable with the ability of his guards to stay awake. Fortunately for Baruzzi, he had expended the energy required to secure a new hiding place for his insurance documents, because the sheriff arrives at the break of dawn with a digging party. His arrival does not catch any of the slaves off guard. However, as they are accustomed to being up before the break of dawn to start doing their previous master's will. Since the sheriff is the law, he simply states his purpose to Beruzzi, and only to Beruzzi, of course, and as a matter of courtesy requests that Beruzzi show him to the site of the original documents. Only by verifying the authenticity, I always have trouble saying that word, of the troubling information in the envelope he holds in one hand, will he ever lay the matter to rest. Since I came all the way out here, I'll just go over and have a look for myself. His posse, still on horseback, follows him over to the freshly dug site, and so does Beruzzi, who tries to shift the sheriff's focus. Sheriff, what I wrote as my will was just a revenge tactic for Blightis' part in selling my wife and children. We both understood it was a mistake, so he agreed to help me buy them back. And to show further goodwill, he even gave me 2 wagons with teams to help me rebuild my life here. Seeing as my house was destroyed, probably by some drifter passing through and carelessly using it, not putting out the cooking fire before moving on. The sheriff is not buying Beruzzi's statement, although he does not say so outright. I hear what you're saying, Beruzzi, and I am glad you boys have put your differences aside. But as the law here, I feel it is necessary to have a look at the papers that you said were buried here. Compare them with this, slightly waving an envelope in his hand. Assessing the freshly dug dirt, he tells Beruzzi, it ain't fitting for you to be playing with the law like this, Beruzzi. Now I'm only gonna tell you one more time, I need to see them papers. Sure, Sheriff, they're in the house. I'll go get my original for you. Much obliged, Beruzzi, the sheriff responds with a certain warning in his slow pace of speech. Beruzzi returns to the house, while the 4 men on horseback following the lead of the sheriff dismount to stretch their legs by the freshly dug and loosely refilled hole in the grass. Beruzzi's back quickly enough to disrupt their discussion of what they believed to be hanky-panky at play. Here you go, Sheriff. Here's my copy I had buried along with my valuables, my gold pocket watch I would have wanted my brother Brondez to have, and a listing of my slaves in his care, the ones on his plantations. But since I am back, the sheriff nods his head, as though trying to convince himself that there is some truth to the story he's hearing. Okay, Beruzzi, okay. He turns his attention to his posse. Come on, boys, let's go. Will you and the boys not stay and have some coffee and breakfast, Sheriff? Thanks all the same, but we will be on our way. In further efforts to convince the sheriff that all are as Beruzzi would like them to appear, he asks the sheriff to put the word out. Say, Sheriff, as you can see, except for chickens, I need to start rebuilding my farm from scratch. Please drop the word that I am looking for responsibly priced livestock and farming equipment. The sheriff looks at the 2-footed, air-breathing farming equipment that have been closely eyeing him and his team since they arrived, though appearing busy with their duties, and slowly shakes his head before confirming, will do, Beruzzi, with a tip of his gray, flat-brimmed felt hat. Mounting their horses, the sheriff and his men leave Beruzzi with his not quite people, oh my goodness, to start building a community that would be pivotal to the future of what is seen as black-skinned beings in the Western world. He watches the sheriff and his men ride into the distance before he walks over to his children, who are exiting the barn to see what the day brings. The activities that Beruzzi has planned for his children this day will actively bring them closer to work that is ahead of them. He walks over to them, crouches to wrap one arm around the both of them. They lean against his thigh for support. He is a fortress for them, resting in the safety of his physical strength. From his pocket he removes the chain watch and the locket he had not reburied along with the money and logbook last night. The children look at his face in anticipation of the story he's about to tell them about the two pieces of jewelry, tokens of their love for each other in a life past, a story that is limited to what Baruzzi knows about the love between Grace and Dreyfus, and the role that love played in his gaining a family of his own, a story he wants to tell them by the river. He looks at his children in admiration and asks, "How about you take Daddy for a walk down by the river?" The timepieces tell not only the hours and the minutes of each present day, but they also embody the knowledge of ages past. They have a lot to say to the children. Tell them stories not only of their lives past, but of lives past before theirs, in times past before theirs. These timepieces want to tell Abe that through his father Baruzzi is doing the work that he himself had set out to do as Dreyfus. They want to tell Mabel that she, as Grace, was the guide who led Dreyfus to this path in completing the work he had set out to do before Blightis took his life while on the ship that brought him back to this land as Abe. But the children are not yet in the spiritual place of comprehension. Thus, like their father, whose knowledge of the timepieces is limited to the memory of his brain instead of the memory of his spirit, they look at the pieces and caress them in admiration of their aesthetic beauty, not yet fully knowing their practical purpose. The keeper of the time in each day, and a storage case for a treasure image of a physical entity who passed through this world not many years ago. And Denise is speaking here. Yes, clocks, objects do talk to us, to all of us, but not all of us can hear. How do you think anyone who invites anything is able to do so? Contrary to our mistaken belief that it is the inventor who brings things into existence, it is the opposite. It is the thing communicating with the inventor, telling the inventor how to bring it out of there and into here, that brings about what we term as an invention. Interesting. It, whatever it may be, is all out there waiting to communicate with someone who can hear or see, who will therefore bring it here, where we can touch it with our fingers or conceptualize it with our clump of matter called brain. Now, as for that clump of matter, we, human, are all still elements of the earth, while the Creator has chosen to make us temporary, self-transportable, air-breathing beings after forming our mortal bodies from dirt. It does not change the fact that we are still simply a collection of elements that are mobilized only by our spirit, as gas or oil or electricity mobilizes the clumps of metal we call automobiles. In essence, like gold, silver, copper, plastic, wood, or anything else that one can imagine, we are all one in that we are all elements of the earth, dirt. It stands to reason then that since we are all of the same tangible substance as well as spiritual substance, then we need only to be on the same frequency to communicate with each other, meaning human, communicating with metal and trees, not to mention animals. In Book 5 of this series, I speak extensively about our relationship with rocks, and in Book 6, I elaborate on our contracts made before we became human, as we now know ourselves. No longer willing to participate in a master-slave relationship, removing all his slaves from Baruzzi's care, from Brondez's care, is Beruzzi's only reason for setting eyes on his brother one final time. As is the un, as is the usual for this time of the day, Brondez's house is quiet. Beruzzi finds him in the parlor enjoying a drink while perusing some documents. Brondez looks up and condescendingly acknowledges his brother, who is peering at him with contempt. He breaks a heated silence. I suppose you came to ask me to take control of the new clan you paraded through town yesterday? Pouring himself some more brandy from a crystal decanter before sauntering about with it in his elegantly furnished living space. From what I hear, they are not a bad-looking lot. You heard correctly. They are not a bad-looking lot at all. But on the contrary, I came to you out of courtesy to let you know that I am heading out to the fields to collect all of my slaves in your care, and all 98 of them, Beruzzi injects him. At that bit of news, Brondez violently chokes on his mouthful of brandy. Beruzzi's not fazed by his brother's distress. He takes a seat in a well-cushioned floral chair to enjoy the show. The choking, the coughing, the fanning of the arms, the barely audible, "Water, please!" His house slaves are not to be seen unless summoned, and therefore are not privy to their master's dire need. As though he and his brother were in a calm two-way conversation, Beruzzi carries on. Since you know about the clan, I suppose you also know that my wife and children are home. Brondez is still too preoccupied with trying to clear his airway to give a quick response. The two blows he just received, one from inhaling brandy and the other being the news that the chattels will no longer be in his care, are clearly taking their toll on him. Nonetheless, leaning against his liquor table for support, he whispers a raspy rebuke. "They are in my care," interrupted by repeated coughs, "because you can't control them." Now coughing without speaking, he barely makes it to the nearest piece of furniture designed for comfortably seating three, whereon he collapses. Having fulfilled the purpose of his visit, and though not entirely sure his brother will recover, Beruzzi brings an end to their conversation. "I will leave you now to your destiny. Good day." Brondez, however, having his voice resume competition with his coughs, tell Beruzzi, "We haven't got but 20 slaves left between the two of us." Slowly turning with his full attention, "I beg you pardon?" Beruzzi inquires, "What do you mean, but 20 slaves between the two of us?" Brondez knows he has a delicate explanation ahead of him, one that will require a drink of water before he starts talking. The arrogance he displayed just moments ago has quickly turned to a pathetic display of humility. For forgiveness that his secret vice of gambling has in the last year gotten the better of him and forced him to sell the large majority of the slaves in very much the same way he sold Ventese and the children in order to cover his debts. Only now is he sorry he has caused his brother so much pain. "To whom did you sell them?" Beruzzi demands to know. Ask Brondez. Asked Brondez, looking at his brother as though that was a question that was not inevitably expected. In repeating his question, Beruz slowly and carefully enunciate every word to ensure his brother fully comprehends. Brondez, with multiple extended pauses, "To whom did you sell them?" Correctly believing that unless he can offer his brother something promising, his brother will launch a physical attack on him in his weakened state. Like a beam of light illuminates a pin in the dark for picking the lock on the door of the cage in which he feels he is locked. An idea pops into his head. Oh, right here. I have the documentation of each sale detailed right here in the. He reaches into a secret compartment of the wardrobe affixed to the wall. For when things turn around and I could. He trails off to avoid mentioning the word buy in the phrase buy them back. The land. Peruzzi wonders aloud. What about the land? Peruzzi demands, raising his voice to a volume at which it can be clearly heard by the slaves who are many rooms away in the kitchen. Have you sold that too? No. The land and the house are still ours. Ours? Peruzzi freezes, his eye contact with that of his brother's. Brother, unless you sign over to me today, complete ownership of this house, the land, the nails, even the rat shit in the cellar and under the floorboards, you will go to the gallows. I will see to it. He checks for Brondez's comprehension, demanding, do you understand? Do you understand that? His rapid, successive questions ending at a volume and with an intensity that gives one the feeling that the decanter might quiver off to the liquor table, the quivering being a result of his slamming his hand against the top surface of the nearest wooden table. Brondez thinks about it, but not for long. Yes, I understand, he nods repeatedly and stops. He nods again while walking to his writing desk for his inkwell and quill pen. No, Brondez, no. There will be no room for you to cry duress in this. We are going to visit that rascal of a lawyer of yours. He is a professional at drafting and witnessing these transactions. He will be our witness and our legal representation. It is late evening when Peruzzi returns to his farm with 2 wagons filled with black-skinned beings, all of them he rescued from his brother. The lead wagon he drives himself, and the other is driven by one of the 2 helpers he had taken with him. Not one slave ran away between the plantation his brother controlled and the farm. You see news of white society passes into the sub-society at a survival fast pace. Upon overhearing the brothers argue about their ownership, a male slave made his way into the field to alert the others of their fate. Therefore, when Peruzzi and his helpers arrived with 2 wagons for their transfer of ownership was not a surprise to them. The countenance of the ones driving the wagons sent a signal that life for them in their new environment would be better than the life they were leaving. Nevertheless, it was news that they should retrieve their own children before traveling that fully released their tensions about what was happening to them. Now with their children in their arms, they sit in the wagons looking at the black-skinned people working, building houses, building pens for farm animals, building coops for chicken without the need for a cracking whip. They are looking at black-skinned bodies walking about without chains, weighing on their psychological and physical strength. They are looking at black-skinned bodies stepping away from their work to scoop and drink water from barrels in the shade and taking the time to observe the faces looking at them before returning to their task on their own time. They sit and they look and they envision this will one day be the norm for black-skinned beings in this part of the world. My goodness. Only a few months have passed since the family returned to the home they now enjoy. Their newly built house is more of a community center than it is a family home. Beruzzi spends a great deal of time reviewing the slave holding documents that he took from Blightis Rodin, as well as those he took from Brondez. Although it has been months since he has rescued the slaves both Blightis and Brondez had in their possession, causing his family to number more than 70, he is still focused on rescuing others, some of which belonged to Dreyfus and had been sold by Blightis. Furthermore, he has enlisted Blightis to actively help in the retrievals. In return, Blightis gets continued occupation of his house and a monthly allowance to keep him fed. In fact, it was he who approached Beruzzi to beg for a livelihood. Of course, he is not trusted to go off on his own to do a reclaim. Rather, he works as an agent along with 2 other white men whom Beruzzi has hired to do the pickup and safe delivery of traceable slaves to join the family on the communal farm. Brondez's livelihood, however, is a bit more labor intensive in that while he still lives in the mansion, he has to labor in the field for his food. He is allowed to sell whatever he harvests to cover his needs, but nothing can be harvested by slave labor, as per Beruzzi's stipulation for allowing Brondez to remain on the property. Ventise is heavily pregnant and as a result has to fight with her self-assigned caretakers to get her share of the chores. Today she lost because her female companions have managed to successfully usher up every chore she attempts. She teaches literacy to select part of the family, to whom in turn teach others in private, but it is not yet that part of her day, so she steps out onto the porch and walks to one end where she takes time to breathe in the peacefulness of her environment and admire the beauty of the greenery along the lake. Regardless of the amount of time Beruzzi spends with his wife, he feels it is never enough. The feeling between them is evidently mutual, but her horrors of the past and the uncertainties of her future cause her to often reflect on her losses and gains and appreciate the peaceful moments in which she now lives, never having to question her husband's love and devotion to her and the children. She does not yet notice Beruzzi admiring her from where he stops at the opposite end of the porch, as she is lost in appreciating the beauty of the river and her children playing only a few feet from where she stands. While scanning the landscape, her eyes meet his smiling face and adoring eyes. She too takes the time to admire the physical attributes of this man and embrace the love she feels for him, moving within her. Broadening his smile, he waves the picnic basket towards the river before saying, "The children books are in here too. The children know the drill and are eager to learn by the river, at least as much as they are eager to enjoy the goodies that can always be found in the basket." They run to their mother to take her by each hand. Her arms are already positioned to wrap around her children by the time they reach her. As an observer, the same as the guides and angels who stand at the distance watching the family by the river, one might be inclined to believe the children have forgotten the nightmares through which they lived only a few months ago. Now as before, their lives were disrupted. They learn and play and eat by the river where they slept through their parents' wedding. The river that holds their secrets of days gone by. The river that holds their secrets of today. The river that holds the secrets of so many before their time. I think this is Denise talking here. The river, the Mississippi River, like all rivers, it talks. It tells a great many stories. Aboriginal people stories, black stories, Hispanic stories, white stories, animal stories, tree stories. If we could hear them, read them, understand them, see them unveiled through the channeling of message of the spirits that dwell along the river's stretch, we would be enriched with stories of the slaves that traveled along its length, stories of how they fed them, sheltered them, provided them with friendship, refuge, and quenched their thirst, we would know the value of its spiritual role in Black people's history, its role in getting them to where they now sit socially in America and in the rest of the Western world. We would know the spiritual role it played in moving Black beings out of their physical chains of iron, and the role it can play in moving them out of their current psychological and social shackles to their further spiritual enlightenment. We would know the story and the song through which Baruzi is about to teach his children, so that when the time comes, they know exactly where to dig for the treasure he has buried somewhere along the shore of that witnessing stream. And that is the end of chapter 15. We have a afterword. Oh, you can't see it. Okay. We have an afterword and a foreword, which I will be getting into next time. So for now, we will leave it there. If you've enjoyed your time with me, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. I wish you Baruch and Shalom.